and gentlemen, welcome back to Black and Blurred.
Hi.
That's Dan. I'm Brandon. Guys, we're back with another episode, and we're jumping right in. We've got another guest with us, closing out. I think we're going to close out the year with this one, Darren. I mean, this is December. It's Christmas.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
It's Christmas. And we've got a sister here with us, Miss Tytus 2 from Miss Tytus 2 channel on YouTube, content creator on Instagram. You do your podcast too?
No, I don't have a podcast yet, but I need to get one started.
I mean, YouTube kind of serves as the same thing, but either way, welcome. Welcome to Black and Blurred.
Thanks.
How long you been in the content creator space?
Oh, I think I started in 2019, so 5 years.
Yeah. Wow. What made you do it in 2019?
Okay, so long story short. Basically, I had a friend at a church that I used to go to that became a Hebrew Israelite.
Oh, yeah.
And I started having debates with this person, and I was realizing that they were totally wrong, but I could not defend my faith adequately. So I started, going on YouTube, looking for resources, started reading books about the topic. And then I just got into apologetics really, really I took it seriously because I didn't know anything about apologetics before then.
Yeah.
And I have like a word of faith, prosperity gospel type of background. So I had a lot of different beliefs, and I had never really been challenged from, more like a academic historical standpoint of, is Christianity really true? So I got to thank my Hebrew Israelite friend for kind of pushing me in the deep end of the pool. And so that's basically how I got into apologetics. And then I just started making videos about the books and things that I would read and videos and stuff that I would watch. And so that was it.
Yeah. Wow. Is he still a Hebrew Israelite?
To my knowledge, I think they've kind of drifted off into something else, but it's still kind of in the same anti-white, anti-Christian type of thing. So yeah,
we've seen that trend. We've seen that trend. Now, we're here for a specific purpose, right? I think one thing that I've been encouraged about being in the content creator space, Darren and I, we started this podcast, one, because there were a lot of things that were becoming mainstream that were once kind of unspoken. And now people were not only being drawn to this ideology, but they were bold enough to say it out loud. And that's like this blurred view of blackness. And then obviously subsequently a blurred view of everything else, personhood, gender, sexuality, all that stuff. And we existed in a church space where we were the only two Black American men who disagreed with a lot of the common ideology that people held, and was kind of just, I don't know, was beat it off the backs of others regarding our disagreement and why we disagreed. So we started this podcast. But something that's been encouraging is seeing a lot of brothers and sisters in Christ who also happen to be Black Americans who are seeing the veil that has existed over time through the guise of Black culture. And it's been stealing Black Americans away from the truth of the gospel, biblical gospel. That's not to say that every white American who's a Christian has the true biblical gospel because they're white, but at least in our space, there's a lot of things that have been stuffed into Black culture that's really anti-Christ. And for the sake of Blackness, it's maintained. So we're going to attack a little bit of that today, ruffle some feathers, and we specifically brought Tytus on so that y'all can get mad at her, not us.
That is not right, man. That's not right.
Before we do that, though, you and I, we were all just laughing about Threads, and my frustration with Threads is like Instagram wants their own kind of Twitter X space, and Threads is supposed to be that. I don't know how to use it yet. I'm like a 75-year-old person just complaining on there. Get off my lawn. But you're on there engaging people vehemently, and people are seeing your content and they're engaging with it. And something that shocked me, I think it was yesterday, is you posted a question. You remember what it was regarding faith or atheism?
I think it was about cosmology, like how did the universe get here? Something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Is that the one you're talking about?
I think so. I'm going to pull it up. We're going to remember. I'm about to pull it up. So let's look at it. Let me make sure the sharing screen looks good. Okay, good. I think that's as large as I can make it. So this is what you have. You have, okay, atheists, what if we, for the sake of argument, affirm that God does not exist? Where did the universe come from? Modern sciences point toward a non-eternal universe, so it must have began at some point in the past. Number two, what evidence do you have for those beliefs? Go. You know what I love is the very first comment is me. Wait, atheism is still a thing? So, Titus, you are a graduate of CIA,
Yes,
Cross-Examine Instructors Academy, as am I. As am I. I think I've told you that, or maybe I don't know. I knew.
Were we there the same year?
Really? Wait, I don't know.
What year? Where were you when you went to CIA?
Albuquerque.
Okay, yeah, I was there.
Are you serious?
I've gone now 3 times.
Oh
yeah,
wow,
I was there.
that's wild.
Mm-hmm.
That's wild. So yeah, okay. Well, so I'm going to run down some of these comments, and I'm just going to have you respond to a couple of them. This is one answer to your question. Number one, time as part of space-time emerged simultaneously with space as a function of the Big Bang. So the concept of time as we know it had no temporal beginning, only a causal beginning. If that's not a satisfactory answer, I ask you, where did God come from? If you insist that the universe have a beginning, you must assert that God had a beginning. Titus, go.
All right, so Christians believe in a God that is eternal, and anything that begins to exist must have a cause, but our God never began to exist. Therefore, he does not have a cause, and that's basically what we call the Kalam cosmological argument, made popular by Dr. William Lane Craig, but he took that, I think, from some Islamic
it was a Muslim
philosophers, right? Yeah,
right.
yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I don't know if Dean Chirac has ever heard that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know what CMB means, but he says CMB and the laws of physics provide much evidence in support of this. In fact, the real question is, where is your evidence of God? That's not very coherent, but go.
Yeah, I'm not sure what CMB means either, but to me, the easiest evidence for God is the person of Jesus, because we know historically that he existed. So at that point, like, I love to talk about evidence for the resurrection. You know, we know that Jesus was a real person. Gary Habermas's 4 minimal, or not 4 minimal facts, but his list of minimal facts is super helpful. And, you know, just talking about the things that both secular scholars and Christian scholars agree on certain facts about the resurrection. So for me, I'm like, if you can prove that Jesus existed and prove that the resurrection, or at least give good evidence that the resurrection occurred, then for me, that's evidence for God. But also, like, I love the fine-tuning argument, the fact that things in the universe are so ordered. And I was even reading Jonathan McClatchy. He has so many articles on all the science stuff, because he's a complete nerd, and I mean that in the best sense possible. Like, Jonathan McClatchy is a genius, but he was talking about irreducible complexity. So when you start to look at, you know, even the human body or the ear or something like that, and you need this part to make this thing function, but you can't have this functioning unless these other 20 things are, it's crazy. So I'm like, irreducible complexity, fine tuning, those types of things, I think, are good evidence for God's existence.
It was the irreducible complexity argument that made me, or won me over regarding evolution. I'm not saying I was an evolutionist or regarding macro evolutionist. I'm just saying that the jury was out, because you know, all of the different argumentation regarding it, and no matter what side you're on, there are going to be assumptions you make regarding it. But irreducible complexity and the lack of a link, you know, there's so much missing evidence regarding the claim to macro evolution. It's theory, it's theoretical by nature, but irreducible complexity was what won the day, where it's like, at no point can my human heart be kind of like transforming into a human heart and still function. It's not going to work. All right, let's do one more.
Okay.
The universe came from the Big Bang, and since nothing existed before, the Big Bang always was. Oh my. Just as your God always was, and you have no trouble explaining where God came from, we can literally see the universe still exploding, in parentheses, expanding. The Big Bang isn't something that happened, it's something that is always happening and is still happening. Yes, our universe is still exploding, per se. It has been exploding since the beginning of time. Since the beginning of time. The explosion just gets less violent. All right, Titus, what you got for him?
Okay, so I'm definitely not the expert on this one. I don't even think I had read that comment yet, but I think there's some philosophical fallacies here and probably even scientific. But from my understanding, the expansion of the universe is actually evidence for a creator because it just shows that the universe isn't eternal. Because if it was to collapse back on itself, it would start back at a single point. So for him to make this claim that the universe just always was, well, I mean, that's a claim, but you haven't given any evidence for that. Whereas the Bible is our standard for what we know about God, that God has revealed about himself. So if we know that the universe is not eternal, to me, I think it's more logical to assume that the Bible is right in how it describes a creator. So, yeah.
I mean, you even said in your opening question, modern sciences point towards a non-eternal universe. And I think the biggest thing was the discovery of redshift. And the redshift is how we know that the universe is expanding. And if something is expanding, like you said, you press rewind, there's a point of singularity. There's a start point. And what's so interesting in his question is he used the phrase "since the beginning of time."
Yeah, interesting.
Wait, bro. I thought you said there was no beginning of time. Oh, okay.
Self-defeating contradiction.
Yeah, man. That's Frank Turret's favorite stuff. Self-defeating. All right. That's enough
that was
fun. It's enough fun. It's time to make some people mad now. Now, something that I wish, and something I think that will be common in newer generations of Black American Christians. And I'm going to highlight that because of the culture that we've kind of all grown up in, is that something like apologetics won't be foreign or won't seem outside of our culture. It'll be a part of Christian culture, which we are a part of Christian culture. And it'll be a part of our discipleship in the way that we raise our children and the way that we talk to each other and defend our faith. But speaking of Black culture, there's a big cloud around it, and that's just the skin itself. And there are certain allegiances, commitments that we're supposed to make. And if you aren't Black enough to have gone to an HBCU for your college, then you at least had to have done another rite of passage, which is join a Black fraternity or sorority. Now, did you attend university, Titus?
I did.
Where'd you go?
Well, I will say that it was a PWI in the South.
You're not Black. as our friend Joe Biden would gratefully tell you. Yeah. So now here's the thing. That's a very interesting thing. I wonder what Black Greek fraternities and sororities are like there versus where I went in Baltimore City, HBCU. Darren, you were out in Cornsville, USA in Ohio.
That's right.
So quickly, what was the experience like, the quote unquote Greek life where you were, Titus?
Oh, they definitely were typically well liked on campus, popular through parties. It was just kind of like Black excellence, So if you were Black on my campus, a lot of us wanted to be a part of that because it looked like it was a lot of fun and it was really cool. And those are typically, the smarter ones and the ones who just kind of, I know nobody says this anymore, but like they got the swag or whatever, you know what I'm saying? So it was definitely something that was something that a lot of people wanted to do if you were Black on a white campus.
What was it like on your campus, Darren?
All 7 of them. Yeah, I would say it's pretty similar. I don't know, they were kind of corny, I mean, they were.
But yours was an HBCU as well.
Yeah, in Ohio, Wilberforce University. Thing is, when I got there, a lot of them were suspended. Where'd you get crickets? That's ridiculous. A lot of them were suspended
For hazing?
and for hazing.
Okay.
And I kind of get it on that campus. It seems like they were all trying too hard. Because here they are in Ohio. Nobody respects them.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody respects their school, but they had to some kind of, assert some kind of dominance in a lot of ways, and that's what they were doing. It was odd. Nothing about them made me want to join any of the organizations.
So, Tytus, did you want to be a part of one? Which one, and why aren't you?
I did. So I wanted to be a part of Alpha Kappa Alpha, so the AKAs.
Mm-hmm.
They were, typically the just best dressed, just well put together, really smart, just the girls that, kind of the it girls.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to do it. I went to an interest meeting, and my experience going to interest meeting and getting interviewed was just extremely traumatic. It was terrible because I just wasn't prepared. I found out later. Well, okay, maybe not later. I found out as I was going through the process of learning about how to join the organization, like all the red tape and how much research and how you get to know people, because really it's kind of about who you know if you don't like have the resume to just make them want you. So I just made a lot of mistakes. I didn't market myself well. So they were like, girl, absolutely not. You will never be a member of this sorority. But yeah, that was my experience trying to be a part of AKA.
Wow. Time out. So there's an elitism to it. Interesting. Sure. I didn't get to that part where I'm like doing interviews. I went to an interest meeting, and I just thought it was very juvenile. I thought it was very, it just was unattractive to me. Now, I had also just come to Christ, so there were probably some things in me that died. And in that meeting, it's like, hey, this is stupid. So I left. Now, there are probably people listening. There are definitely people listening to this podcast, and they're thinking about fraternities and sororities, and they would say, well, what's the big deal? Fraternities and sororities is a college thing. You go to college, you join a fraternity and sorority, you leave college, boom, it's gone, it's done. Why is that not the case for Black fraternities and sororities?
For me, I would say the religious undertones are number one, especially if you're a Christian. There's a lot of ritualistic things you have to do in secret, oaths you have to take that I think go against what the Bible tells us is okay to do as Christians. And then also, just practically speaking, a lot of these organizations participate in hazing. Hazing can start off innocent, and then, sometimes it can be deadly. There's a lot of people who go through processes and they don't make it out alive. It's not everybody, but it happens enough where, it is something to be concerned about. So I would say religiously, just for your own personal safety, there's a lot of things that can go wrong if you try to pledge an organization like that while you're in college. Yeah.
Now, what sets Black fraternities and sororities apart from typical just college life joining a fraternity and sorority?
Well, there's just so many different types of organizations. So Black fraternities and sororities, fact check me on this if anybody's listening. I think there are social organizations, or maybe both social and civil. Whereas like I was in a business fraternity when I was in college. So basically they would help you with your resume. They would help you learn how to conduct yourself in a job interview. They would teach you how to do presentations. So those were things that, were typical, and it wasn't that bad, but there was like a slight hazing pledging process there. Whereas these Black organizations, and there's white organizations that are more social and stuff too, they do like the underground hazing. And then of course they'll do community service. So you might see them picking up trash on a Saturday morning, or, doing things with local high schools or middle schools and all these kind of things. But I would say it's different because it's more about the social aspect, but they kind of market it like it's really about Black excellence or helping the Black community. But really, from the outside looking in, it looks more like it's about, just kind of being that person on campus. That's me looking from the outside in. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, so let me address what you just said. From somebody looked from the outside in, that's definitely what I got. I think Darren, that's what you got. It just wasn't attractive to you because it was like you said 7 of them total. But
they were whack. They were so whack.
But I mean, when I was in high school, I mean, we grew up in a musical family, so I have a very eclectic musical playlist of George Clinton was one of those. Parliament Funkadelic. It's one of those things I used to listen to when I was younger. I remember going to a parade and watching these guys in purple shirts and gold boots do this routine down the parade to Parliament Funkadelic. I said, I want to be them. That was it. That was all it took.
Such a lame.
Yeah. It's quite lame. But something that rubbed me the wrong way, kind of like what you brought up, Titus, is maybe what people don't know, who are listening to this and aren't familiar with the kind of the Black experience regarding fraternities and sororities, is that there are stereotypes attached to these groups. To these groups. So from the outside looking in, you've got AKA, you said they're the put together ones, right? They're smart, they're the it girls. What have you heard or even personally believed about others?
Okay, so the deltas are also well put together. Well, anyway, I would say all the sororities and fraternities, they typically want to look good, right? Collectively, they want to look good, but the AKAs are kind of more like the prissy type. And the deltas were like the pretty girls, but like the tough girls, the, don't mess with us type of girls. Zetas and SG Rose. Okay, so I read this book called Our Kind of People. And they kind of categorize some of these organizations. So they say that the old guard, there's only 5 of them. So that would be the Omegas, the Kappas, and the Alphas, and then the AKs and the Deltas. And everybody else, they kind of say, those aren't really like legitimate because they're not the original. So the 5 old guard are typically, from what I can tell as well, the ones on campus that are the most popular.
Yeah.
So the Omegas are like the tough ones, the very, I guess, promiscuous based on some of the actions that they do during their coming out ceremonies. Very, very just lewd and crude and all that. The Alphas, I think, have the reputation for being kind of the smart, nerdy ones, but they have the really good steps. The Alphas can step. And then the Kappas are kind of like the pretty boys, so they do the shimmy or whatever. So Zetas and I never got back to Zetas and SG Rose. I don't want to say anything negative, but they just typically Zetas, SG Rose, Phi Beta Sigma, and the Iotas aren't even. Nobody even really talks about them because they came like 20 or 30 years after everybody else. So
at Morgan, right?
Yeah.
Was that Morgan? Yeah, that sounds right. Out there, Yep,
at Morgan. So this is I remember I was in a African diaspora class at college. And I don't know, I lost track of, I thought our term paper was due at a certain point and it was due the next day. So the paper that I wrote was the irrelevance of Black fraternities and sororities in our modern day. And my whole point was, from the inception, you had the Alphas. That's why they're called the Alphas, for those listening. Where they started on the campus of Cornell. And Cornell is obviously Ivy League. Ever heard of it? No. But obviously Ivy League and white. And so you had, I want to say, I can't remember how many, but super minority, less than 20 Black students, and they form a fraternity, a fraternal order that makes sense from the surface. It's like, hey, this can be potentially hostile territory. We need to band together to make sure we matriculate through this. Safety also with excellence, and that we hold each other accountable and have each other's backs. That makes sense. But then came the Black campus, the all-Black campus, where majority of the ones you talked about were formed on Howard. And it's like, that just doesn't make any sense. I mean, you've got the thing that you wanted was your own space. Now you've got your own space, and you're forming further fragmented groups on this campus. And I hadn't heard about the 5 thing. I know about the 9, divine 9, they call it. And then they look down on anyone else that's not a part of the divine 9, which, as far as I'm concerned, these fraternities and sororities are attached to your blackness. It's about being black. This is the black experience. And you never stop being black. So when you graduate from college, you still do this stuff.
Yeah.
But we also simultaneously look down on the other organizations that are, seemingly doing the same things or whatever. So let me ask this before we get into the spiritual side of it. Do you see any difference between older generation? I don't know if you've had any contact with older generation members of sororities or fraternities versus our generation and younger. Is there any difference?
That's a good question. From what I can tell, the older generation, I would say, just seems to have a little bit more class, a little bit more respect. Whereas now, some of these strolls and the dances and stuff that they do on these campuses and the things that they say is just so horrible. And there's just a level of, I don't know. Now, this is just an observation. So maybe this is just what I'm seeing. Maybe it's always been like that, but there just seems to be like a devolving of self-respect from what I can tell and how they kind of act in these organizations, where I'm not sure if the older crowd would be as okay with some of that stuff. I mean, the Q's always been nasty from my knowledge, but I don't know if everybody was kind of like that. Now, some of the girls and, the dancing and stuff, it's not very becoming.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess
I remember when we were on campus, it was like the alumni weekend, I guess. There was a step show, all that stuff. And it's hard to say. I mean, it was a lot of people there, so they weren't all from my school. Some from like the surrounding schools in the area. And I remember these alphas were outside. Like, it felt like we were on the block. Like these alphas were outside. They had tinted out black Altimas with gold rims. They all got they walking around with red cups.
Stomped the
yard. These older guys come up and they have on suits. And by older, I mean they had to be in their 60s, maybe. They had suits on. They had their Alpha Phi Alpha pins, and one guy walked up to one of the alphas and said, "Who are you supposed to be?" And the guy was like, "Oh, we A Phi A," and they all, "Oh, 6," yelling. He said, "No, you not. Like, you dress like you at a party. You outside during the day on campus. Where's your suit?" And so he had a very different level of respect for the fraternity than these other guys. It kind of felt like a gang. Yeah, to be honest.
Yeah.
Those dudes were intimidating. Like, I wouldn't want to be a part of that. They looked like a gang outside. They had t-shirts, red cups blasting. That's when Graduation came out, so they were playing Graduation, Kanye West, and it's like, what are y'all supposed to be?
And some of them, I mean, I've done videos about this. Like, they will threaten you. Like, if you're wearing some of their paraphernalia or something like that. Not to say that if you're not in it that you should do that. As a Christian, I think it's wrong to lie, but I also think it's wrong to bash somebody's head in because they're wearing a shirt that they got out of Goodwill, not knowing that it was, you know what I mean? That it just seems counterintuitive to the whole, being for the betterment of Black people.
Right. Right. And, and that's the whiff I got when I was in college, that there was this rhetoric that was going to be regurgitated regarding why you ought to be a part of this organization. It's for community service. It's for, like you said, Black excellence, the tradition of it and maintaining that excellence and things like that. And, man, I can't think right now. Networking, all of those, all of that stuff. Yeah. Meanwhile, all I saw was the ability to be noticed on campus.
Yeah.
That's what I saw. Now,
elitism.
Yeah. The elitism of it. And at this point, my childhood friends are still my friends, and none of us got spanked for it. So I was okay. We were still boys, and we had a strong bond. So, okay. So now, what you mentioned, strolling. Now, there are people who probably don't know what the heck you're talking about with strolling, because I think that is something that is very unique to Black fraternities and sororities. What is strolling?
Sure, yeah. Strolling is one of those things that I think is genius because it shows Black culture and it looks good, but it's basically like they'll get in a line and they practice these dance moves or routines or whatever, and they'll, especially at parties or step shows, they do these strolls. Some of them have been doing the same strolls for decades at this point. I know the AKAs have a particular one. It's like some of them have their song. I forget the AKA song, but then of course the Qs, they have the what did you say, the psychedelic? What's the
Parliament
Funkadelic, yeah.
Atomic Dog,
Funkadelic, them. And, you know, the Alphas, a lot of times they'll use that bring them out song, and the Kappas Boosie or whatever. So yeah, they do these little dances where everybody's doing the same thing in a line, and it looks cool. You know, at a party, it's a cool thing to see at a party. But you got to be careful, because if you break up that stroll, you might not make it home alive, because they might, especially if you're a dude, they might get you. They take the strolling very seriously. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, it's a line dance. Apparently, it's a sacred line dance, because we could all do a line dance as soon as we're finished this episode. Let's just do a line dance. As a matter of fact, whenever Darren and I were at a party or something like that, there's a certain dance we would do together, and people would always approach us and ask us if we're part of some organization. We got asked if we were in a fraternity. One time we were on a cruise, and a guy asked if we were, asking us if we were Masons or something?
Yeah,
because Masons line dance. Only, let me tell you, this is for any person who's listening to this who's Black and who's a Mason. I just want to let you know now, and this is with the love of my heart, because I don't think you should be a Mason if you are a Christian. I'm assuming you're a Christian if you listen to this podcast. You shouldn't be a Mason. But if you are a part of the organization and you identify as a Christian, one in Christ, one, leave it. Number two, you're not a Mason. You're not in the know.
What you think?
You're on the surface, the club, you know, the club type Prince Hall thing. But okay, let's get to this. So there is a video circling the internets where people can see a lot of fraternities, fraternity and sororities strolling all at the same time. All at the same time. And it just so happens to be in a sanctuary during worship service. Have you seen this?
I've seen that video, yeah.
Whose church was that?
Oh, I want to say it was William Murphy.
That's right.
Oh, of course it was.
Of course.
Of course it was William Murphy.
Now, what?
You got to walk it out for Jesus.
Why do we have such a stumbling block created when we start talking about the Christian faith and Black fraternities and sororities? Why do you think that creates such a stumbling block?
I think it's because of the implications on the structure of the organizations on the gospel, because we've already talked about elitism. So this, I'm better than you, and othering of people. And if you have this, if you're wearing these colors, then you're more important to us than people who are not wearing those colors. That's antithetical to, you know, Jesus's teachings of loving your neighbor, even loving your enemy as yourself. So I think that's one major red flag. We already talked about hazing and these rituals and things that just totally go against our faith. But because of the connection to our Black culture, I think some people, I don't know what it is, but there's like a disconnect in really being able to see like how this is not compatible with our faith. And it's really hard to explain that to people when they're knee deep in those organizations because they love them so much.
Yeah. All right. Devil's advocate.
Okay.
But Tytus, we do community service. We support the community.
We could literally say that about so many different cult groups. I mean, atheists participate in community service sometimes. First of all, as Christians, we know that we're saved by grace and not by any works that we've done. So just because you do good things sometimes, it does not mean that those works justify you. So to say, oh, well, because I do good works, that means the organization is good. Okay, well, no, it doesn't. Also, the organization does really bad things. I mean, some people are in the grave right now because they were doing something in the name of your organization. So you can't talk about the good and also leave the bad out.
I'm sorry. I'm devil's advocate. That was an all right point. That was all right. That was all right point. Now, you're talking about Christians and all this Christian stuff, but at least I have a brotherhood.
Well, I mean, the church is the body of Christ, brothers and sisters. So I don't know why you would feel the need to get brotherhood outside of the church. I mean, I don't have a problem with people being in other organizations because you don't have to do church all day long every day. That's kind of crazy. But if you're looking for true brotherhood, there is no greater brotherhood that you can find other than what you can already find in the church. And you shouldn't have to do secret rituals or do things that are going to be in conflict with your faith for the sake of brotherhood.
I remember I was this is Brandon talking now. Devil's Advocate's dead. His head has been crushed. So, I remember I was in a study room in an engineering building, and there was a honor society, which also involves Greek letters. I think it was like Tau Beta Pi or something like that, that we were invited to be a part of. I just renounced all types of things that involve me doing more than saying, okay, yes, and shaking somebody's hand. If it's more than that, then nah, I'm all right. And I remember there was this woman who was younger than me, sophomore, I think. And while I was studying, I had my headphones on and I was kind of just listening. And she was like surrounded by people who were just also fellow engineering students who were trying to get her to be a part of this group. Like, you got invited, you can join. Just join the honors, whatever. And she's like, but I'm a Christian. Now she wasn't adamant. I could see that she was working it out, right? She was working it out in her own heart and mind. When she says, but I'm a Christian, she's like, and then the other people were like, hey, yeah, we're Christians too. We're Christians too. It's got nothing to do with it. It's not that big a deal. She said, well, if it's not a big deal, why do I have to go and do this thing that y'all can't tell me we're doing? Like, why is it secretive? That makes me think I shouldn't be doing it. And I think that's a good rule of thumb. When it comes to going back to what you said, it's like, there shouldn't be secret oaths and pledges and allegiances for the Christian. When I came to Christ, my pledges and my allegiances were used up. That's it. That's it. There was a moment when I shifted from kind of being apathetic to being anti. And that was when I was about to get married. And my wife, she had pledged Delta in college. She has since renounced. But since I was apathetic, she knew how I felt about it. Like, I could go on a rant about it. I told you I wrote a paper in a day about its irrelevance. So when we were about to get married, she said, hey, is it okay if my sisters sing at our wedding? The Deltas like to do this thing in a wedding. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. That's cool. What's the song? Let's tell me what the song is. And basically the song is elevating her identity as a Delta at our wedding. And I said, Tula, here's the thing. They're going to sit down and applaud like everybody else. Because this day, what they're going to watch is they're going to watch you die and me die and us become one. So whatever letters you used to wear as your identity, it's not there anymore. There's an us. And that's what they're going to watch. But I realized that these organizations are present at two major times in your life. At your wedding and at your funeral.
Yep.
Those are identity markers. They're there to mark their territory as an identity marker. Have you ever seen either of those at a wedding or at a funeral?
No, I recently went to a funeral where there were Masonic rites done. I've heard about like Omegas and Kappas and things like that, and Deltas having funeral rites. And I've seen the videos of people doing these ceremonies and stuff at weddings, but I personally haven't seen that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Darren, you were at Uncle Wilbert's funeral. Were you at Uncle? Yeah.
I was at his. No, I wasn't. I was at his repast.
Oh, okay. So yeah, our uncle, who was an alpha, and at his funeral, they make it. It feels like they take it over. I mean, our family, and this is a big deal. This felt like a big deal to me because, he was a pillar in our family. A patriarch. He was our family patriarch. And so to have a family patriarch who's also a believer, and to have the entire service kind of overshadowed with black and gold and alpha phi alpha rhetoric, it's kind of a stain for me. It's kind of a stain because if you ask me, more than an alpha, he was a father. He was a husband. He was a father to nephews of his. Yeah, I've mentioned this multiple times, but that funeral, I've been to multiple funerals, but that funeral holds a vivid picture in my mind because, when they give the family the last opportunity before they close the casket, before the service starts, like all of the men, the next generation above us got up. My father, his brothers, their cousins, they all got up. They don't do that at funerals. Maybe their wives will do it and they'll go up and they'll all be weeping, but they all got up crying to see him one last time, at least see the shell of him one last time. And I felt very, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? Slighted to have them come up and kind of overtake that very special time for us as a family to lay our patriarch to rest. And it kind of makes it feel like it's saying, hey, we're glad you guys came. Yeah, we're glad you guys came to our funeral service for our brother here, the Alpha. But these identity markers, I think they're way more subtle, but way more serious than people realize. Mm-hmm. Now, you did an episode, and we can get ready to close out, but you did an episode with a young woman who I think was Delta, wasn't it? Is she? Yeah. Yep. What were some things that she was highlighting? Because I guess the basis of that episode was she's a Christian and she's renouncing her identity as a Delta. Am I right in saying that?
Yes. So her name's Melissa, and she was a Delta for, I can't even remember how many years, but she pledged in Georgia, and she just talked about how horrific her hazing experience was, and getting paddled and being talked to like a dog, and them telling them to eat dog food. So she ate dog food, and then they did all these rituals, secret rituals, I guess, for the actual induction in a church, and she was just like, that was weird, to do all these secret things and say these things that she didn't really think about, because at the time she wasn't a Christian. But now that she's a believer, she's like, man, I went back and I looked at my rituals and I thought about what we did, and I know that wasn't right. Mm-hmm. So, that story, that went crazy on TikTok. I think it got over 1 million views on TikTok, because I think when people heard her say she ate dog food, they were like, come again and say what? Because I think the average person doesn't know what underground hazing can look like. It can be crazy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you, I remember I'm looking forward to doing an episode with Talani. That's my wife. And we talk about this because there are a lot of kind of like in between stories that we can tell that are related to this. But when we were engaged, I asked her this question. That's a lie. When we were dating, I asked her this question. I said, and this is so random, but I said, hey, if you were ever somewhere and I came over to your place and your friends are all over there, and I walked in and I asked you, hey, can you make me something to eat? How would you feel? And I just left it at that to see how she would respond. And obviously, she knows why I asked that question. The point was, one, would you care about how you look if you made the sandwich or whatever would you care about what people thought about you in that moment, and that would therefore affect the way you respond to me? Would you give me the benefit of the doubt that even though you don't like the way I've said it, can you trust that I love you enough to never, ever treat you in the way that you think I sound like I'm treating you? And number 3, can you believe that this is completely hypothetical and you'll never have a situation like that? Maybe. Yeah. Or are you just overtaken by your emotions that says, I value my standing in front of these ladies more than I do our relationship? Because all of that was important to me when it comes down to how she views marriage and things like that. So obviously she passed. We're married. But we did have some tough conversations. when she was renouncing, because there were some other things that I didn't know about regarding her membership or being a Delta. She wasn't a member. She wasn't paying fees. She wasn't even doing the stuff. But there were still some things that she had kept from me. Maybe not intentionally, but it's because even while we were dating and got engaged and then got married, she just never thought to bring them up. And since she had stopped even like walking in her Delta-ness, there were some things that she had kept from me. And I'm not saying actively, but at some point it was active and she just kind of forgot about it because she wasn't walking in that. And so what I'm saying is, even from a passive standpoint, there were secrets in our marriage that naturally exist because you're a part of this organization. So that means that our marriage can't possibly be a primary relationship inherently. If there are wedges that are drawn and you don't even have to actually actively form those wedges. It's just expected of you, hey, you're going to keep things from him regarding this sisterhood that we have. It's like, well, no, me and her both agree that our marriage is the primary human relationship that we both have on this earth, above any other human relationship we'll have on this earth. And that's important for us to guard. And I highlight that to say that can't be the case when you're a part of these organizations. When you're a part of these, and so if that can't be the case for us humans, then it definitely can't be the case for somebody who has pledged their life to Christ. If you are a part of these organizations. And so I brought it to my wife about that. Like, that could be the worst possible thing. A man come in front of you and your friends and ask you to do something a wife would do for a husband naturally. Meanwhile, what are some things you were willing to do to get those letters on your jacket? Isn't that interesting? Now, this is not to her specifically. I'm just saying the stuff that it forms in you to say, this is what you ought to be willing to do to become one of us. Meanwhile, a narrative amongst black women and black men is that, hey, marriage ain't really all that important. It's not that important, really.
Yeah. Yep.
What were some other things Melissa highlighted besides the hazing that kind of either led to conviction or affirmed her in her convictions?
I think this is still related to hazing, but when she ended up doing it to other people, I think when she thought about that in hindsight, how she treated people, how she was slapped. I'm not sure if she slapped anybody, but just these humiliating things that they would say and do to each other and then call each other sisters.
Yeah.
It was just, she was like, I can't believe I did that. It was totally wrong. So I think that was kind of at some point the light bulb went off. Like, I can't treat people like this, especially now knowing what she knows about, how Christ expects us to treat fellow co-image bearers. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now, the origins of it, this might have to be in a completely different episode, but something that always evaded me is that, okay,
Is the Greek part?
yeah, it's like you got the black beauty, right? The beauty of blackness. And then you're on this all black campus with all these black people because blackness is just so black and beautiful. And then the essence of that blackness is identified through Greek letters. What's that about?
You know what? I would have to go back and look at all the origins, but I know you already talked about how the Alphas started at Cornell, and they basically took what they saw from the white organizations. I know some of them would not admit that, but I watched the Alphas documentary about theirs. They're like, yeah, we basically we learned what we learned from them and also from Freemasons, because their first initiation ritual was in a Masonic lodge. So a lot of it goes back to Masonry. I can't remember exactly why they incorporated specifically the Greek stuff, but I know the Alphas kind of wanted to pattern their organization after the Sphinx and all this Egyptian stuff. So theirs, I think, is a little bit more African than maybe some of the other orgs, but ultimately a lot of it goes back to Freemasonry.
Yeah, interesting. So interesting. And then not only that, but there are rites and rituals and ceremonies that exist with these things. And I think that when people listen to us talk about this, and amongst other things, like next week we're going to do an episode on the movie Wicked that comes out, and this is the thing in my mind when I anticipate people saying, "Y'all doing too much." I'm sure you get that. I'm sure you get that.
Yeah,
Y'all-
I saw Wicked too, so I have a lot of thoughts on it.
Oh, you saw it?
I saw it. Yeah.
Oh, we might have to hop on another one.
Gotta go see it. We gotta go see it though.
I know. That's what I
should go
said.
see it.
I just don't have time. I mean,
I know.
And it's a long film too, but yeah.
and that's just part one, right?
Yeah, just part one.
Yeah. I don't know if you know Amy from Eyes on the Right podcast. You familiar with her at all?
I don't think so.
Okay. But that's what we're doing an episode with, because she's actually worked alongside people who work in Hollywood and have dealt with satanic ritual abuse and things like that.
Okay.
So we're coming at it from that angle. But I'm sure the response when they hear us talking about and just opening people's eyes to the reality of the world is like, you doing too much. It's not that serious. And then we can flip that back on their head. Like, if it's not that serious, well, then how serious is your profession of Christ? Because obviously we're talking to Christians who have made a profession, and that, hey, there's a warning that you could see Christ upon his return, and his response is, and you are? So
that's the black and blurred version.
That's the black and blurred version. Yeah. I'm sorry. Who are you? And so that's what we're doing. We're alerting Christians to say, hey, this is what it means to be a believer, that it is no longer you, but Christ who lives in you, and that ought to look a certain way. It's not that we do a bunch of things in order to be in Christ, but it's that when we are in Christ, the fruit and the evidence of that shows itself. And that evidence and that fruit can't possibly be having other allegiances and pledges, just like I don't wear multiple rings. I'm not going to wear multiple rings. You're talking to some high school seniors who are professing Christians, and they're black, and they can't wait to go and have their college experience, which the quintessential one is a different world, right? You got all, that's everybody wanted that experience. And they're going to college, and the first thing they want to do is join a fraternity and or a sorority. They're like, Tytus, which one should I join? Go.
I would say, I think what y'all need to do is try to find a good Bible-based gospel preaching church and make that a priority, and skip the Greek life stuff again, because hazing is dangerous. And, I just, at this point, I am so disappointed in how the culture of those organizations really impacts those who profess to be Christians. I think it puts you in a very compromising situation. Like, whether you're talking about these rituals and these oaths that you have to do that basically say, well, you're going to be a part of this for forever, and if you break this oath, it'll follow you to final judgment. Like, why would you want to repeat something like that as a Christian? It's going to follow you to final judgment. That's crazy. But even just like the commitment to doing all these things for the organization, the parties, and how they treat people who are not a part of it. I think as Christians, we have to look at that and say, you know what? I don't think that's God's best for me. That's not going to really give me the opportunity to be a light on campus, even though they say, oh, this is how I'm going to be a light. I'm going to join this organization so that I can have an influence on them. But that's not typically what you see. What you typically see is the other way around. People get caught up in all this stuff, the partying and orgies and stuff. You don't want to think about that happening on college campuses, but it's happening.
Yeah, it is.
There's just so many, the sexual side. You hear a lot of them talk about how promiscuous they were because of the orgs, especially the men. I interviewed a friend of mine who used to be an Omega, and talking about that kind of stuff and how bad they beat him. I showed the pictures, or he showed a picture of what he looked like after his I don't know if it was what they call it set. They go to set a couple times a week and they beat him or whatever. So it was either set or when he actually got in the organization. But the bruises on his back, awful, just awful. Like, you don't want to treat somebody like that. So yeah, I would say skip the Greek organization, find a church, and then maybe try to find a service organization, something that's going to actually be for the betterment. Plus the pledge process is from what I've heard, so taxing, having to stay up late, being exhausted, not having time for your schoolwork. Like, you don't want to flunk out of college because you're trying to become a part of a organization. And the price tag, from what I hear, is also crazy.
Yeah.
For me, sometimes
That's enough. That's enough for me. Yeah. That's
the
enough.
price tag. Like when I
Right. You
told
said
my
three-
mom, like, thousands of dollars. I'm like,
Yeah.
Mom, I really want to do this thing. So can you slide me? I think at the time it might have been $1,500 or something like that. And she was looking at me like, where are you getting this money from? Because the show ain't coming from me. But I don't know. I don't know how I was gonna get that money. Maybe I was never gonna get it, and that was one reason I didn't make it in. But I have a theory that some of this really is just like almost like a huge scam to just get people to give you money. Because now $1,500, that's like a joke now. From what I hear, some of these prices can go up to $4,000 or $5,000.
Oh my!
So you're convincing these college students that they are somehow better than everybody else, even though they would never actually say that or admit it, but they do admit it when they call non-Greeks GDIs or GD individuals. That's, y'all know what GD means.
Oh, really?
Yeah, GD individuals. It's a slur,
funny.
it's a dig.
That's like the circumcised and the uncircumcised that Paul talks
Right.
about.
What in the world?
Dang.
And it even kind of reads like that. Like in the Alpha Ritual, it talks about they read Ephesians 4, Jews versus Gentiles. So the Alpha has become the main person of Ephesians 4. They totally rip it out of context. They take the scriptures about Jesus out, but they make the brotherhood about Alpha. So if they are, you know what I'm saying?
Man, that's
they're
satanic.
the Greeks, all these other, it's dark. But I think what I was getting at is I truly believe they're like, hey, let's get some money. If these kids want to pay us $4,000 to be able to wear pink and green, who are we to stop them? Those are my thoughts.
All right, guys, you heard it here. If you have a son or daughter and you aren't getting to them regarding their desire to join an organization and they are a believer in Christ, send them to Titus. She's going to record that exact rant. We're going to keep that exact rant as a receipt, and we're just going to play it. As a matter of fact, for just a small fee of $5,000, we'll play that rant for you, and you can send it to your nephews and your nieces and your daughters and your sons to make sure that they're walking in the narrow way. Titus, what are some things you're working on for people to look out for?
Oh, that's a good question. My desire, with it being the Christmas season, I would like to do a reaction video to historian Bill Federer, because he's done some amazing research into the origins of Christmas. Have you probably heard of him because you're a Frank Turek fan, right?
Yeah.
Or a Cross-Examine fan.
Oh, yeah.
And, during the holiday season, and I used to be one of these Christmas is pagan people because I just believed what some well-meaning pastor taught me, that the holiday was pagan. And so I think that it would be nice to let more people who probably will never watch a Bill Federer video look at his material and, just talk about the actual Christian origins of Christmas. So I would like to do that before the end of the year.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That would be a great idea. That would be a great idea. Where can people find you if you do that? Where can they find that video?
Sure. Yeah. So my YouTube channel is called Miss Tytus Jones. Tytus is Tytus, formerly known as Miss Tytus 2. So yeah, I have a YouTube channel. I'm on Instagram and TikTok. Yep.
Okay. Well, we appreciate you hanging with us today. I'm going to go ahead and forward all of our emails to your email. So make sure people they can take all the gripes up with you. Everything that I said is just parroting Titus's thoughts, y'all. No, I'm joking. Titus, we're glad you did this inaugural episode with us. I imagine we're going to be doing some more. More. We need to see
Absolutely.
Wicked. We need to see Wicked because like we were talking about, I think instead of people's refrain towards us saying that we're doing too much, I don't think people who identify as Christian take it serious enough and what it means to call Christ Lord. And that has the gravest of repercussions. So hopefully we'll be able to take a look at that, and maybe we'll do something in the future. But in the meantime, here's my encouragement to people based on what we were just talking about earlier. I think that there's good news in that we're telling you to refrain from pledging allegiance to groups that say that, hey, we'll break you down enough to where you don't have the will to leave us, or maybe that's when you become a true brother or a true sister, when we've broken you down to nothingness. But in Christ, you become a part of his body because of his being broken down. That's the difference. He was broken down so that we would be made whole. There's no condemnation for any of us. You can't say anything about us that tears our identity apart because we're found in Christ. That's the payoff, and that's far greater than any human being putting their hands on you so that you can wear a jacket until you die, and the jacket will wither away with your body. But in Christ, we live forever.